there, YouTube. Back again for another exciting installment on the Rat Rod build. If you're new to the channel or you're just tuning in, you might be a little lost, so you might check out the other 6 installments on this build. This is a completely scratch built. Started with just everything I've got, just bits and pieces I've had laying around. One thing I did want to talk about in this video was kind of my budget. So the only real spending I've done on this was the transmission, which was 80 bucks. I bought the front axle with the ends. That was, I want to say, about 24 bucks. So I'm in this for about 100 bucks. Oh, and the wheel spacers, which I still haven't figured out yet if I'm going to use. Those are another 20 bucks. So yeah, it's around 120 bucks. Cost of what it was if you had to buy everything, I have no idea. I'm just using the junk I've got laying around, which I'm cleaning out my supply pretty good here. But yep, let me get started on telling you what I've done. Alright, so as you can see, I carried the theme forward from the back. I've got a cantilever suspension link. My original plan was to use the other Jalon 2 coilover shocks, but they didn't play to my plan properly. I'll flip it over here in a minute. I made a really cool mount that mounts to the same bolt as my radius arms, which is similar to what I did in the back. I've got the shocks tied through, lower link mounts, and I just added this. I added another piece of rod in between there instead of having a nut on each side. Having a long bolt like that with the weight of the shock, which is in turn the weight of the vehicle on it, and plus the pressure of that, it could pull back and forth a little bit. And the holes on these chassis rails that I've reused from a vintage road grader, they're not perfect. They're a little big, a little oblong, so I threw a rod in between there, tightened it through to help square everything up and keep it nice and solid. So yeah, I did that on the front radius arm mount, and I use that to mount my shocks. Also, I've added this is a Trailfinder 2 fuel tank mount for your radio box mount. Fit perfect width. Like I said, the front of the Bruiser is the same width as the Trailfinder 2s and the Jalon 2s, and everything pretty much, the SEX 10s, everything on the market is that width. But like you said, the Bruiser flares at under the cab and gets really wide, and that's why Bruiser axles aren't compatible, rear axles aren't compatible with our regular crawlers. So I've added some more bracing here on my, I just like I did on the back. I had a couple of, I drilled some holes here in my cantilever mounts. I had to readjust lengths of things. So I ended up using an existing bolt that I had used here. It was an existing hole on both sides, so they're perfectly across from each other. And I'd already been using it to mount my frame extensions on. So I just took the nut off, put a longer bolt through, ran some spacers, mounted my plates, my cantilever plates, which I made just like the rear. They are the same thing. It's a Tamiya semi-truck, what do you call it? Shackle plate. Your U-bolts bolt through it, and I just clamped them together, cut them into triangles. They already have the holes in the right spot. Everything was beautiful and perfect and jive. So let me get down here and show you the front axle. It's hard to get you down this low. I had a Bob Ross moment. I had a happy little accident. So when I first drilled some holes in the axle, I drilled them way out here on the outsides, thinking that was where I was going to mount my cantilever links to, and they were too close to the U-bolt block. It's cast into the axle, so I couldn't get my link close to it. So then a happy little accident was I decided to drill more holes in the axle. It's kind of hard to see here. So I've got some speed holes drilled through it, kind of that style. I always like that look. Not sure. I'm trying to keep this as ratty as possible. I don't think I'm going to paint it back. I'm just going to leave the bare aluminum in there. Yeah, I'll bring you up here and show you in a little closer. Alright, so now we're looking at the front side of the front axle. I used some creative shims and some scale hardware to mount my rod ends, and this is just 2 offset RC 4-wheel drive plastic rod ends that have been screwed together with a link. Sorry, get you up there, you can see the rest of it too, so you know where you're at. I see this being confusing to look at up close without knowing where you're at. Yeah, so I've got that brace here. It connects both sides and it holds the cantilever mounts perfectly across from each other. I do need to put some Loctite in there. As you can see, that one's a little bit loose due to the movement of the suspension. It does kind of walk that bolt loose, so I'm going to go back and Loctite that for sure. So I've got this one turned with 45 off of that bolt, shock mount here, basic setup. One surprising side effect here that I've had is I'm getting side-to-side flex, which I wasn't getting. I don't know what I've done, if I've loosened up my radius arms. Everything seems to jive and work like it's supposed to, so I'm getting not much, so I'm thinking this is going to work out great to my advantage. I decided to go ahead and leave the front as stiff as it was, where it didn't track a whole lot side to side, because I see this as an off-road type buggy per se. So this is going to keep the front end planted nicely on the ground so we can steer it. Now it's giving me a little bit of flex, so even better. And it's really stiff. I'm having to put a lot of, if I just push down on one side, it still stays pretty even, but if I'm actually twisting it, it'll give one side or the other. So I think it's going to work out great. I may have to play with some shock, the springs inside these scale shocks. Also, these shocks that I wasn't intending on using, these were, if you've seen the most recent video on the K10 build, and I put dual shocks in the rear, quad shocks. Those are the factory 110 millimeter ultimate scale shocks off of the rear of the Trailfinder 2. I had to steal them. Oops. The only thing I had close to the right length, so they're working out pretty well. And before anybody even comments, keep your fingers off the keyboard. It will not fit a can motor, but it will fit a modified motor. I'm not even sure what this guy is here, but I thought about it after the fact, yes, but I checked it and it clears. One of these, I think this is an old, I don't even remember what brand, a Green Machine 2 I had since I was touring car racing in the mid-90s. So that kind of motor will fit. A standard Tamiya can or like a brushless motor is going to hit the shocks. The longer cans will hit the front of the shocks. So like I said with this, I'm not looking for crazy speed. I have no idea what kind of gearing we're looking at. I don't even remember what the Yoda 2 axle has in the rear. I don't even know what kind of pinion. I'm probably going to run the stock pinion gear that came with the R4 just for caution at first and see what I may end up trying that motor, see if it even works. I don't even know. I'm just trying to make the best of what I got. So yeah, we'll just have to see. I've got a feeling it's going to be fast enough. We'll see how well it handles. And I've still got a lot of work to do with the hubs. I've got these front tires bolted on, but let me show you in there what my problem is. Now, as you can see, I've got them just pushed on there. They still have the center hub for the drive axle with the pin. So they're just kind of sitting on there. I've tightened the lock nuts down enough to where they still spin, just to help me mock it up. So I've got to figure out a hub adapter or something. I know there's some bolt-in center hubs like that for the semi-trucks. I may actually have some. I don't know. I'll have to do some digging around again. Hopefully I have some, because I don't want to spend any more money on this thing. But that's one hurdle we have to cross. And I still haven't bolted the rear tires on because I'm not ready to modify wheels yet, because I don't know what exactly I want to run. So they're just sitting on there with the Boom Racing wideners. So let's flip it over and take a look down there. Alright, so you can see my shock set up. I just happen to have a rod the right length here to hold all that together. One thing I did have to do, the stock shock ends for these aluminum shocks, I needed just a hair more length, so I just swapped on some plastic RC four-wheel drive rod ends. I had really wanted to use some of these metal rod ends, but every time I try to use them, sort of right here, they're just too long. And they gave me a little more length than I needed. So, let's see, spin it a little bit. You can see kind of how the bottom mount is. Since I can't get the nut in there, and if I put the head of the bolt through there, I wouldn't have been able to get on it. I used some of these beveled spacers, so they're kind of wedged and pinched around the axle, and it's working really well. It's holding it all in place. And yeah, this thing is, I'm pretty excited. I was kind of at a loss for how this was going to work. Once I hung that straight axle out here, saw what it actually looked like, it was just like, I think I'm screwed. But I'm pretty excited about this. This is not as complicated as the rear. Ideally, I would love to throw a triangulated 4-link all to the one in the rear and have some kind of wild setup, but it's just not the space. And I think it's going to work out well now that I do have a little bit of side-to-side flex. And I think it's going to drive excellent, depending on how fast I make it. But let me show you the ride height. So it's sitting up just a little bit in the back due to the larger tires. If I ran these on the back, I think it would sit perfectly level. Let me show you. So I've got almost the exact same amount of suspension travel front to rear. My rear seeming a little stiff, but yeah, let me get the body mocked up and give you a look at it there. We can start figuring out what the next step's going to be. Alright guys, I forgot I'd put that crossbar in the front, so now I've got the grill kind of clamped in there actually. So that'll help in figuring out a way to actually mount it. So I'm pretty happy about the wheelbase. I think it's going to be just right. One of my options earlier for mounting the links for the front cantilever, I thought about putting them between the axle and the radius arm, but that would have brought my front axle forward a little more, and I think it would have been a little too much for this. Now, if I was doing a T-bucket or something like that, where I would have the front end hanging way out in the front, and I would do an inverted leaf spring and do some wild stuff like that, but the 32 Roadster, I think this is gonna be right. Let me show you some different angles here. I like how you can see the shock right there. I like the chrome shock in there, the polished one. It does kind of get in the way of if I was to do a scale motor, but I don't know. My favorite part of anything is the suspension. I love the engineering. I love the getting technical with frames, chassis, suspension, and I'm not a big engine guy. I mean, you got to have one, obviously, but that's not my area of, I don't say expertise, but it's my area of extreme interest. So this build is just kind of my showcase of the thing I like the most, thing I'm best at, I guess. But let me show you another angle. So that proportion is right for me. I like it. I'm still on the fence about the same size tires all the way around. That may look best. I've got this idea in my head of the 32 Roadster that I've had in my head since I was a little kid looking at hot rod magazines, and it had all the same size tires. So I can't mock it up right now with those because they have the Jalon 2 style hub, and I've got those wideners on there, so they won't just sit on there for shits and grins. So I've got to leave this kind on there for now, but I'm not sure yet. I don't know. I really don't want to spend any money. Like I said, I may look at the 1.9 Landies. I think this being closer to 8th scale, the 1.9s would look better on here, but that's completely screws my tire choices up. So I'm not sure yet. about that. But again, we're still a long way from cosmetics. But yep, I think that's all I got. It's a big step, kind of a short video it feels like, but that's where we're at. So anyway guys, appreciate y'all watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow along on Instagram for sneak peeks. I just posted some pictures of this up, and it's about 2 days ago. So yeah, see you in the next video.